Hi, this is a video for Wednesday of week 3. You should also find a link to Nearpod, so you're going to answer your questions on Nearpod, okay? So bell ringer is actually something that you do answer on Nearpod, but I'm going to go ahead and go over it with you anyway, okay? So this one says Chansey needs to order the following list of numbers from least to greatest, and then we have our list, and then it says which list shows the correct order. So main point here is that they're asking me that I order these from least to greatest. Now one thing that I notice is that I have negative numbers in here, so I like to circle negative numbers so that I don't forget that they're negative, okay? Then we also have some positive ones. So yesterday we ordered numbers, real numbers from least to greatest, and we decided that our first step is that we need to convert them to decimal form. So I'm going to go ahead and make myself a nice list over here on the side and make sure all of them are in decimal form and that I have the same number of digits behind the decimal. I like to have 2 digits behind the decimal because that kind of reminds me of money and it makes it easy for me to put them in order. So from now on, I'm going to go ahead and keep 2 digits. Some of us like 1, some of us like to use 3. Sometimes it's necessary to use 3. Let's go ahead and test it out how it works here. So I'm going to write down negative 7.13 and with the bar on top. Now I want 2 digits. This one already kind of has 2 digits, but this little bar right here tells me that it repeats. So it's really actually going negative 7.131313 and on and on and on. In order for me to round this 2 digits, I'm going to look at the neighbor. The neighbor to the right tells me what to do. If it's 4 or less, I let it rest. If it's 5 or more, I add 1 more. In this case, because the neighbor is a 1, I'm going to let it rest. So approximately negative 7 point. So I'm going to let the 3 rest. All right, now square root of 45. Now these we can try to calculate on our own, but we can use the calculator. So let's go ahead and clear right here, square root of 45, and I get a long decimal, and I'm going to look at that second digit, and I should decide if it's going to stay a 0 or round up to a 1. Now because the neighbor is an 8, that means I need to go ahead and round it up to a 1. So my decimal approximation there, my decimal approximation is going to be 6.71, okay? So let's write it down, approximately 6.71. And then we have negative 55 over 7. So once again, I get my calculator, and remember I want 2 digits. So negative, I'm going to clear this, negative 55 divided by 7, press enter, and I get negative 7.8571. So I need to look at that second digit and decide if it's going to, if I'm going to let it rest or add 1 more. In this case, I add 1 more because the neighbor is a 7. So negative 7.86 is my approximation. Negative 7.86, okay? Lastly, we have 65 over 9. So I'm going to go ahead and get my calculator. 65 over 9. Repeating. So in this case, I look at that second digit, and because the neighbor is a 2, I'm going to let it rest. So it's going to be a 7.22 approximately. 7.22. Now remember, I circled my negatives. I had 2 of them. So here's my negative and here's my negative. Now that I have them in decimal form, I can go ahead and order them on my number line. And remember that on the left I have my negatives, and then on my right I have my positives. Now I'll start with the negatives. Of these 2 negatives, which one should be the farthest away from 0? Now remember that if this was positive, this would be the farthest away from 0 on the positive side. So same things happens on the negative side. This will be the farthest away from 0. So if this is 0, farthest away from 0 is negative 7.86. And so then I'm done with this negative. So on the negative side, I still have negative 7.13. Now I'm done with negatives. Now I need to go ahead and move on to my positives. So I have a positive right there, and I have a positive right there. So on the positive side, which of these 2 is closest to 0? Closest to 0 would be 6.71. So I'm going to go ahead and put 6.71. And then next I have 7.22. So pretty much I have them in order because my number line does it for me, right? Farthest on the left is the least, and farthest on the right is the greatest. And my question said least to greatest. So all that I need to do is now put them back into the original form that they were. For example, this one was originally a negative 55 over 7. And then this one was originally, let me see, I need to scoot up, that repeating one, right? So negative 7.13 repeating. And then on the positive side, my positive 6.71 was actually the square root of 45. And then last we have our 65 over 9. Okay, so now I have them in order from least to greatest. I get to go ahead and look at my answer choices. Now I notice that already these are out, right? Because they didn't start off with the right one. And then they kind of are having this one, they're kind of having the same thing, but here's where they're different, right? So I have first the square root of 45 and then this one. So I'm going to go ahead and say my correct answer is there. Okay, all right, let's move on. Okay, so in your notebook today, the topic is going to be ordering real numbers. We're going to continue on this. We're going to try to get to some real world problems. Make sure you write this down in your notes. That's going to be your topic for today. All right, so before we move on, in our own words, we want to write the steps. So I want to make sure that I'm doing the same thing every single time and that I don't skip any steps along the way. So first of all, the very first step that I need to do is convert every single number that is given to me into decimal form. Okay, so when they're telling me to order numbers, I need to make sure that I convert them to decimal form. Once I have them in decimal form, my step 2 is always going to be to make sure that I have the same number of digits behind the decimal. So in other words, I'm using the same place value. Make sure I'm using the same place value. So I'm going to go ahead and put in parentheses. I always like to use 2 digits behind the decimal. Okay? So, in other words, I'm using hundredths. And the reason why I do this is because it kind of looks like money to me, okay? Once I have them all in decimal and they all have 2 digits behind the decimal, then I'm ready to place them on a number line, okay? Place them on a number line. Now, if I was doing this precisely, this would take me forever, right? If I want to graph numbers on the number line, it's great, but if I want to do it so perfectly, it's going to take me a long time. What I like to do is think to myself, okay, on the negative side, which one's farthest away from 0, right? Because then that tells me which one's the least one, okay? And then I just kind of go in order like that. So when I'm putting them on the number line, it's more like of a rough placement. Not, in this case, we're not doing exact, okay? And maybe I need to go ahead and put a star to remember, are they asking me to order them? Oops. Ah, no, I erased everything. I need to go ahead and remember, are they asking me to order them from least to greatest? Or are they asking me to order them greatest to least? That's important, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. Make sure that you're writing this down in your notes. All right, let's try an example. All right, example 1 tells me, list the set of numbers in order from least to greatest. So I already know that they're telling me least to greatest, okay? Step 1, convert them to decimal form. So I'm going to organize my work over here, and I'm going to say 7 over 2. I type this into my calculator, and I get 3.5, okay? Then I'm going to go negative square root of 8. I type this in my calculator, and I'm going to type it in right here. Clear this, negative square root of 8, enter. Now remember, I want 2 digits, so I'm going to look at that second digit behind the decimal, and because the neighbor is an 8, I'm going to round it up to a 0.83. So this is going to be a negative 2.83 approximately. Approximately negative 2.83. And then we have this one. Okay, now this one, let's be careful because I want to make sure that I type this into my calculator correctly. In my calculator, I'm going to type in the square root of 64 first, square root of 64, enter. I get exactly an 8, and then I'll go ahead and divide. So this one right here is actually more like 8 divided by 4. And I know that 8 divided by 4 is going to give me 2. So when I do my writing over here, I'm going to say the square root of 64 divided by 4 is exactly 2. Okay? Then last we have our negative 2 1/2. And remember, you keep your negative 2, and behind the decimal is what you're going to get from doing this division, which is 1 divided by 2, which is going to give me a 0.5, so I'm going to put a 0.5 right there. Okay? Now remember I told you that I like to circle my negative numbers so that I don't forget about them. So here's a negative number right there, and here's a negative number right there. Wait a minute, we said that our second step should be to make sure that I have the same number of digits behind the decimal. Okay? So right now, this one has 2 digits, but this one only has 1 digit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in there and I'm going to fill in with a 0, because after a decimal, it's okay if I go ahead and add some zeros. Right here, I could also go ahead and fill in with zeros right there too. And then I'm going to go in there and fill in with zeros there too. So this helps me to make sure that I'm comparing the same kind of number. In this case, they're all in hundredths, so I know I'm comparing the same thing. Okay, now let me go ahead and draw myself a number line. And I'm going to put my negative numbers over here on the left. Here's 0, and I'm going to go ahead and put my positive numbers over here on the right. So I'm going to start with my negative numbers, and I'm going to decide, which one's the farthest away from 0? The farthest away from 0 should be this one, because on the positive side, that one would be farthest away from 0 on the positive side, and it should be the same distance on the negative side. So over here on the negative side, I'm going to say negative 2.83 is the farthest away from 0. And I only have one more negative number, so next belongs negative 2.50. Okay, so I'm done with my negative numbers. Now let's go ahead and go on to the positive numbers. So I have a positive 3.50 and a positive 2.000. So closest to 0 should be this one right here. So next I'm going to go ahead and put a 2.00, and then I'm only left with positive 3.50. Okay, so now I have them, and my question had told me to order these from least to greatest. So I'm pretty much done, but wait a minute, I need to put these numbers back into the original form that they were given to me. So let me go back to negative 2.83, and here it is. That was the negative square root of 8, comma, and the negative 2.50, here it is. So that one was written negative 2 1/2. And then next we have 2. The 2 was written as the square root of 64 over 4. And finally we have 3.50, which is here, and that one was written as 7 over 2. Now this is my final answer, my order from least to greatest. That's what they asked me to do, and then I'm going to go ahead and highlight. Okay, so now the next question you're going to try on your own on Nearpod. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so make sure you're writing all this information down in your notes, because it's going to help you. And then you're going to move on to the next question on Nearpod and try it on your own.